All right, so the simple view of reading, just taking you back to this diagram, we're going to look at phonics now, and so we've just had a little look at phonemic awareness, or that manipulation of those, sounds. Phonics is a type of instruction, specifically instruction in sound spelling relationships. So the decoding refers to how a reader uses those sound spelling relationships to read. So I want to explain it like this. If you buy 10 dresses, you will have 10 complete outfits. If you buy 10 clothing items, you can create multiple outfits by mixing and matching, and and with different tops and bottoms and so forth. And phonics works a bit like that. So if a child memorizes 10 words, the child can only read 10 words. So my children used to bring home cards with words on them, sight words we'd call them, and we just have to, go over them every single night. And at the end of it, they would know the word like that was on the card as a whole word. If a child learns 10 sounds of 10 letters, the child will be able to read 350 times 3 sound words, 4,320 4 sound words, and 21,650 5 sound words. So essentially, this is the case for phonics, okay? So, to be able to teach children those letter sound combinations and then give them lots of practice in, blending those together, we're giving the children a toolkit of sounds and letter correspondences that they can use in many different situations. And then as we go through, we're teaching those generalizations that go with that learning as well. So some high yield instructional practices to teach phonics. So going back to that card that I had before, we would use the picture word cards. We'd put them over to the side, and the children have, these are called their sound box little whiteboards. We'll have the children listen for those sounds, and we'll put the counters up the top, blue for the consonants or the digraph sounds, red for the vowel sounds, and they will hear those sounds, and then they'll write those letters in underneath and then write the full word. Another high yield instructional practice again is the word chains, but this time they're writing them on their little whiteboards. So this is an instructional card, for example, write the word sock. Now I'd like you to change the S to an R. What word do you have? Now change the R to an L, and so forth. And then you can get more complex as you go through. Level 3 here is they're changing the initial consonant team to got the same ending, and we're just saying to change, and you might say change brick to trick or something like that. And so they have to figure out what has to change in the word. So word chains, a lot of research backing the use of word chains to help children improve their phonemic awareness and phonics knowledge. Now, when it comes to teaching of sight words, we at TLC have our protocol for teaching those. We do not send home cards with, learn these as a whole word. We explain to children, first we look at the word, and the children identify the parts of the word that they know, the sounds that are, that they know already in the word, like find. They would know that sound and an and a d, but the I sound there is saying something a little bit trickier than they've been taught. At this point, perhaps they've only been taught the it sound for the letter I. And so we would look at that tricky part, and we would say, oh, in this word, this particular I is spelling the I sound, and we would put our pie emoji up there, and that will help the children read that. And then they have to memorize that part, that's the tricky part of the word, and then they will put it out in their sound boxes and write it out, and then we'll look for other words that are the same. So we tend to teach our high frequency words in sets of similar words, similar type words, so that the children can see the pattern, okay? And this is what I say all the time, that spelling is actually teaching of patterns. So things to remember, we need to ensure that children are pronouncing the phonemes correctly. That is the actual speech sounds. If children are not pronouncing these correctly, then they're going to have trouble pronouncing words correctly, of course, and then also finding the right spelling patterns for those sounds. We work with a robust list of words for word work activities, or those picture word cards. They're the same thing, they've got the words on the back, and we use previously taught spelling patterns only. So we're not asking, unless it's those high frequency words where we actually teach them the tricky part of the word. We need to ensure that when we're mapping words, when you're mapping words with children, that the phonemes, that is the speech sounds, always map together in one sound box. So in the word sheep, we're using Elkanon boxes or e-boxes. We would make sure that those letters that represent that sound are mapped together in the same box. So now we can see that children take their knowledge of print concepts, their knowledge of phonemic awareness, phonics, and that's how they, are able to blend and those letters together to recognize a word and then to also spell it. All right, so this is an example of one of our resources. I call it the OM boards, orthographically mapping boards, because basically if children can work through this, they've got a card up the top, and they can work through this process, ending with, writing a sentence in their books, then they've orthographically mapped that word. They start with looking at a picture, they count out the sounds, they put counters out to represent those sounds, they write the letters, write the words, say that word in a sentence. That shows that they know the meaning of the word. And so when a child can read, spell, understand the meaning of a word, and use it in its correct context, they've orthographically mapped that word. The word is then stored in their long-term memory and it is easily retrieved. And this is what we refer to as a sight word, because they know it by sight.